Welcome to Framework. I'm John, one of the hosts of Framework. With me is always the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today, Al?
I'm feeling good and tranquil, John.
Perfect. Today is the beginning of a new era of the Bioware Omnibus, our ongoing coverage of all Bioware games. It's a big one today, right? Dragon Age Origins.
This is, arguably the apex of Bioware's accomplishments. If you're a real old head of a computer RPG geek.
Yeah. Okay. So for you, I mean, let's just say right off the top, where does this fall for you? Like just historically, in your rankings of BioWare and in the importance that it had for you, it's very high for me. The only thing that can kind of tilt at the Mass Effect saga, I guess, would be the original Dragon Age Origins.
Yeah, this is probably the single game I put the most time into.
Yeah. It's kind of a masterpiece, right?
It is. Like I would, take the mealy mouth way of saying, I think this is the single best game they ever made, and Mass Effect as a whole, the trilogy is the biggest accomplishment.
I like that. I mean, this is a lot more niche, I think, than Mass Effect. Mass Effect is like that's the big obvious Star Wars of their output, despite having put Star Wars games out. This is more niche. This is more for old school RPG nerds. But within that community, I think this is sort of just this totemically excellent game, one of the greatest games. Yes. Certainly one of the most BioWare games, and it's kind of like where all their stuff is really, really. It's for the fans in a sense, in that it's unfiltered BioWare, I guess. It's all the stuff they do really well, kind of condensed and fully on display, and not necessarily for a mass appeal game. This is for nerds, and unashamedly.
And it's fussed over. It is harder to tell in this one, particularly now. I mean, the versions you play today with all the DLC and bells and whistles applied, you don't feel the corners being cut anywhere the way you still can in Mass Effect 3 and Dragon Age Inquisition. There's a few odd side quests that are like collect 20 potions or whatever, but not nearly as much of that. We'll talk about the whole origin conceit here very shortly, but the phenomenon we mentioned in one of our other episodes of sort of you get these big games where the opening act is really elaborate and fussed over, and then you can feel like where the crunch come in to later in the game, and they're cutting corners there. But this all the way through feels very fully rendered and fully polished.
It feels like an older generation of game design, and it is. And I guess that's in a positive and negative way. I mean, you play this now; it's a dated game. It's an old game. I think it's a lot closer to what we would consider normal playable kind of RPG than certainly within Baldur's Gate is in 2024. I guess what it actually is just sort of a evolutionary step from Knights of the Old Republic in how it looks and feels.
Oh, I think of it as much more of a direct line from Baldur's Gate 2. Now there is a Baldur's Gate 3, which confuses the issue, but that's how this felt to me when it came out. They made Baldur's Gate. The mechanics under the hood is all pretty much the same, and they made it 3D, and it's not officially a Dungeons and Dragons world. It is their own version of the Forgotten Realms that they have mixed in 50% of Game of Thrones into.
Yeah, you can really see the influence. This is before Game of Thrones, of course, is a giant juggernaut of a show. I think is this before?
It came out a year before.
Yeah,
the series premiered. But they read those books. They are lifting liberally from the Grey Wardens are the Night's Watch. Just full stop.
Well, they're also the Jedi. I mean, there's tropes here.
But they're the darker thing of it. They have the right to sort of conscript people who would otherwise be condemned to die.
It's true.
They're not monks, but they are sort of sworn to, have no families. And I suppose the big operative difference with the Night's Watch is that the Darkspawn, the Blights, are a more active and persistent threat than the White Walkers. So
right.
people don't take them as seriously in the lead up to this game, but it's not because they don't believe they exist. They're just like, oh yeah, that we don't really have to worry about those fucks. But it's not. They're like, oh, Darkspawn are a myth. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is like we're already starting to just get into the world of it here. And the reason being it's a great one, and yes, a lot of familiar ingredients to be sure. We got elves, dwarves, and men all up in this shit. It's very much in the sort of high fantasy Lord of the Rings format that we are very familiar with at this point. That said, despite that, I gotta say this as a game world, as a franchise world, or whatever the phrase would be, the fantasy world of Dragon Age, Thedas, and Ferelden is extraordinary, right? It's a classic Bioware game world with characters and factions and history and creatures that all it feels alive, and that's the key, right? That's it. The world fucking works.
Yeah, it's got the elves and the dwarves and the dragons and giants, and it calls its orcs darkspawn, but it's got all that stuff in Tolkien. But the way that it is rendered is with a lot more of the sort of cultural specificity of Game of Thrones, and like the way that these different cultures have interact and their histories have overlapped and affected each other is thought out to a much more, I suppose, realistic degree, even as it is a much higher level of fantasy than Game of Thrones, fairly low fantasy.
Mm-hmm. It feels like, I would say that without question, the thing this game does best is make it feel like you are at the center of a long form fantasy story, like you're reading a series of novels about the Dragon Age or whatever, written by Brad Sanderson, and getting deeply involved in the history and learning what the Chantry is and what its relationship are to the Templars and to the mages and all that stuff. It becomes kind of like second nature, over the course of the game and the series. And it's just sort of a lot of things that you are invested in the way that Game of Thrones works or Lord of the Rings works. It is that all consuming fantasy world that, is, well, when it's done right, it's the best, that's why this is so great in a sense, is that it's you love the world of it, or at least I do.
Yeah, you like to explore it. It is also, we should say, it's more R-rated, a la Game of Thrones, than the PG or PG-13 version of Dungeons and Dragons or Tolkien would be.
Yeah.
But I think it does that pretty well. That's not an easy thing to do, to have elves and orcs and that more adult flavoring to it.
Mm-hmm. Dwarf sex scenes, you can do it. Absolutely.
Yes.
And yeah, it's it's interesting that this kind of did rise at the same time of Game of Thrones becoming a cultural juggernaut. I wonder if that, I don't know, it's probably somewhat responsible for the success that Dragon Age has had, but also held it back in a way, maybe?
I don't know. I feel like Dragon Age is a pretty big hit. Right?
It is.
Before that.
It is. I don't think it, no, it definitely is.
I think back in 2009, or at least in the geek realm, our touchstone was more the Battlestar Galactica reboot in terms of taking something very like goofy genre stuff and making it dark and gritty. Or I guess the Nolan Batman movies are another good example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is doing that thing, and yeah, I don't know how. Like, I don't think this had cultural penetration in the way that Mass Effect did, for example. It definitely was a hit in its own right, but yeah, like it just kind of didn't have as many audience-friendly things that made Mass Effect big. This kind of was huge within the world of, people who are into video game RPGs.
Yes. I can think of probably 3 reasons why that might be. Even as I don't want to overstate like that Mass Effect's mainstream impact, because I don't know that that normies really know who Commander Shepard is still.
Fair enough.
But there's probably a difference in that sci-fi is not quite as geeky as high fantasy.
Right.
Nothing really tops high fantasy for pure geekiness.
No, we got made up languages. Absolutely.
Yeah. And two, it being a Mass Effect being kind of a shooter rather than a pure tactical RPG, pausable point click thing is a broader palette of video gaming.
Absolutely.
More accessible there. And two, the voiced protagonist and acted protagonist was, I guess that's three then, but probably made it felt more cinematic. And this is kind of a throwback even in its own time.
Yeah. This is in the legacy of Baldur's Gate and other games of that type in a very big way. In a way, Mass Effect, I don't know, isn't as directly. Mass Effect is like doing Star Trek and Star Wars things, a lot more mainstream. And this, of course, like reading a big dorky fantasy novel. That's what it's got going for it. The game itself, you kind of were talking about it is a strategic RPG. What does that mean exactly here? It's it really strikes me as this is kind of an evolution of the Knights of the Old Republic combat system. That's how it felt to me initially, and kind of how it still plays to me. It's what it looks like on screen.
Well, I think that's just because it's animated in 3D. I think it actually mechanically is the Baldur's Gate combat system, like almost entirely. It's just
is that not Baldur's Gate leading into Knights, leading into this though?
Yeah, but I feel like it's circling back to be more because Knights was not as functional in terms of how the level of detail you could drill down to. And I didn't have to take much account of the geography of the battlefield when playing Knights of the Old Republic. And that could be a level design issue. Right. The only time it really came up that much is sometimes, you get a big enemy locked onto your guy and you just run in circles while everybody else plinks at him until he dies. And that's a tactic that I will certainly use in Dragon Age as well. But also,
yes.
It's also, maybe this is adjustable too, but Dragon Age strikes me as much more difficult than any of the Knights games or Mass Effect.
Yeah, I'm discovering that now as we revisit the game and we play through it, and I've kind of pot committed to an evil character, which means I will not have Wynn's healing services throughout the game, which causes a problem for me. I now have to make sure I can beat the game.
Yes,
because it's hard. Without her.
You could be a mage yourself, and you can teach. Morgan knows heal in my playthrough.
Yeah, it's all going to be on Morgan. I can't be a mage myself. I've made that bet as well. You see.
But thank you also for throwing yourself on the grenade of doing the evil playthrough, because I kind of intended to do that and found I just can't do 60 hours of this.
I'm not particularly happy about it. I'll tell you that. This is one of those grueling evil playthroughs for sure. It's one where you feel bad about it and it's not much fun. It's neat they put it in there, but just like, God, I'm not loving it. Yeah.
It is well written, actually. But it is that thing of like, maybe I could find a way to role play it where I make some of the bigger evil decisions, but I just can't.
That's what I'm trying.
I don't know. It's the hardest part. I don't know. Maybe it's a weird form of social anxiety I have, but just telling my companion characters to fuck themselves to their virtual faces is just something I always loathe to do. Like, well, but now we have to have lunch with these people.
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to have interpersonal relationships that more or less function. And it's not me just being like, you're a coward and you should die. I hope you leave. And then they would leave, which is a mechanic of the game. Yes. So you can't actually role play just like, well, I'm just a pure asshole all the time, or the game will punish you, which cuts you off from some of your giant asshole moves that you can make later in the game.
Well, it's arguably too realistic about that. Because, you can't just go around being a total asshole to every person in your life without it fucking up your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. That's a hard way to live, I think.
Yeah, it's not fun, as it turns out. It is a trial to get through, as often as not.
But you will get to do a thing at the end of this game that I have still in all my playthroughs never gotten to do. We get a whole playable character that I've never.
Oh, I'm going to get him
to get myself. Yeah,
I'm going to get him. Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. All right, but we're way ahead of ourselves now. Yeah. Let's just talk about I love how hard the combat is in this. It's challenging and it's fun. Because they becomes these puzzles to solve, and they are solvable. in a weird way.
It's close to XCOM almost.
That is, I was thinking about that a lot, actually. Yeah, we and I, we talk about XCOM a lot. I don't know. We'll probably never do an XCOM episode. But
you never know.
It has something that's about that is the reverse difficulty curve of that is a game that is the hardest it's ever going to be in the opening levels. And as you go through it, it will get easier. And also,
that's not unusual for RPGs. That's like
true.
You power up, and that's the fun of it a lot of the time.
Well, but there's also going to be like a scaling up at some point of the enemies. And in a Bioware RPG, it's often become a point where we've gotten through the opening act, and now the world is opened up to us. You can decide which branch of the story you want to pursue in what order, and whichever one you choose first, it tends to be the hardest because in some of these games they don't level up the enemies with you exactly. So whichever one you go to, you're going to be the most under-leveled for.
I don't have the clearest read on how that works, how they match you. I think I don't get it. It's.
I don't think they even do it at all in this game. I think they're just kind of everything's hard for a while, and as you get better, but also like the combat system here is deep enough that you gain a mastery of it, and that's satisfying.
Yeah,
and XCOM is good about that too. It layers in over time new abilities for all your different people, and you get better and have more things. The most frustrating aspect of this that applies to like starting a new XCOM campaign or doing an origin here is. This is when the difficulty can be the hardest, and it's in large part because it's when your toolbox is the most empty. Like you just don't have a lot of different things to try in the opening hours. Right. Mm-hmm. You don't have you start with one special attack in your origin, probably maybe more if you're a mage, I suppose. But it just kind of there leads the thing. If I'm losing in fights in the origin, I just have no choice but to bang my head against the wall until maybe my rolls get better, like luckier. Mm-hmm. But once you're kind of into the swing of the game, which I've gotten to now I don't mind a really hard fight that I have to try a bunch of times because I can try different things actually.
I mean, yeah, if assuming you're not in the fade, we'll talk about the fade later. But
that's next episode.
Yeah, It's fun, but it becomes more fun as it goes. Is the thing, and that's generally, I don't know. Is that just a progression system though? Like most games, that's probably true of. It feels extra true here. Like the actual playing of the game improves.
Yeah, as you level up. I mean, it's sort of talking about XCOM. It goes back to Mega Man. It is.
Yeah.
Expanding your toolbox as you go, and then you also getting more comfortable with the game, and you can do more stuff. And now I'm having a lot more fun a couple hours into this game doing different forms of crowd control, which is what a lot of this. I mean, I don't know. Are you playing on hard or what? I'm doing Nightmare.
No. I'm unlike Mass Effect. I'm being a coward and just being normal, and I don't care. I've been through the game enough. And I know it's hard, and I'm just like, well, I don't have win. Eventually, I'm going to upset win, so I'm just going to do a normal playthrough of this and not bash my head against the wall trying to beat things I've beat many times before. It's I'm returning to this game for story. I'm not sure I'm going to keep that for the entire Dragon Age run, but for this first one, I'm definitely just being normal.
I may drop down with you in Dragon Age 2 because I remember that one being a lot more of a slog to get through combat-wise. But for now, I am really enjoying it, even though it means that, yes, my party of elite badasses has been slaughtered by just random packs of wolves multiple times.
Yeah, I can't go through that again. I just downed it. Just fuck it. Biting the bullet.
But a way that this does harken back to Baldur's Gate, as opposed to either Knights and Mass Effect and Jade Empire, is the companions are really fully functional members of your party. They're useful. You have complete control over them, and you know what they're doing.
They're really important too.
Yes,
more than any other Bioware game, maybe other than Baldur's Gate. It really matters who you have on your team and how well you. I mean, this is why I'm talking about. Well, I'm fucked because I don't have win. Like that's just sort of a thing in this game. Is you got to know what your team's doing too. You got to unless
you got to micromanage them.
Mm-hmm. And to the point where kind of like you kind of have to decide everything they're doing. I don't really set routines for them because I'm just hands on the whole way through.
Oh, the routines are great. Actually, that is something that customizable tactics. You unlock more of them as more slots to give them AI instructions. You get to program their AI in a way that is much more effective than in other Bioware games. You set them to, okay, when you see an enemy mage, use this ability on them immediately. When you go below a certain 50% health or 25% health or 75% health, then I can program them to use a regular health poultice, use the least powerful health poultice you can, use this healing spell.
Yeah.
It is very, very customizable. You don't have to do it, but it is effective, and you can tell the difference in how they act once you've done it.
God, I remember that is very useful. I would be doing myself a break to get involved with that again.
On normal, I don't think you have to, though.
Probably not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think actually that is an underrated thing. It's not a thing I spend a ton of time messing with, but it is something that makes this game very playable on nightmare difficulty. The fact that you can tweak the AI and the AI is not completely ineffective the way it is in most other of these other games we've already played. Or even like in Mass Effect, I got the sense that actually the companion characters were getting more effective as that series went on, but I still couldn't really tell what they were doing at any given point.
I mean, I'm setting up combos with them in Mass Effect generally, and that works. But they can also just be left to their own devices and be effective. A big part of it is honestly just drawing focus from enemies. In any game with companions, that's sort of one of the most useful things they can do, inevitably.
Well, crowd control too. That we're constantly freezing somebody, and if you knock somebody down, or knowing who has what stunning ability. I mean, that was the part that worked in Mass Effect, I suppose, is I knew what I was picking people based solely on what activated special abilities they brought to the table. Because I know that like Garrus's gun does more damage than Tally's, but I have no idea how much either of them are doing. So I just kind of ignore that. And I'm just make sure I have a biotic talent on one end and an engineer talent on the other.
Interesting.
Dragon Age, I'm much more in the weeds.
I would say I'm much more like character focused in Mass Effect, where I'm more driven by who I want to take with me, just because I want to hear what they have to say. What are Grunt and Rex Grunt and Morden gonna talk about? I'm curious about that. Let's make them a team, see how that works. What they're actually bringing to the battle is sort of a secondary concern, and in most versions will work. That's not the case here. If you take all like magic users in Dragon Age, you're fucked. It's not going to work. You're going to have a really good plan to get through any board with just magic users, and you probably won't be able to do it. It's probably not worth doing.
Well, that's true. Actually, I have a party full. Because I do like those party interactions too. In Dragon Age, they're great. I had done a thing where, when I'm walking around inside the town, I bring 4 warriors with me, because that will give me, if I have Sten and Alistair and Shale around, I'm not going to get their interactions that much. So when I'm walking around in town and I know I'm like not actually get to fight anybody, I'll just bring a different group of people to see if there's different interactions. And then I forgot
the thing where we both played it a bunch and know where you're going to fight and where you're not.
Yeah. But I forgot that there are some parts in town where you just get jumped in an alley, and then I'm like, no, a group of 4 warriors doesn't work either.
It probably works better than 4 mages, but yes.
But there aren't 4 mages in this. There's a max of 3, right?
Right. Even with you, it's 3, I believe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you're 3, you could bring 3 in a rogue, I suppose.
Yeah.
But also later,
if you want to be not useful. Yeah. 3 in the.
You could make your mage into a tank later in the game, actually, though. As I recall, works pretty well.
Well, I'll see what I can do with Morgan there. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, we're getting into different character classes here, which I don't want to get into just yet because I'm still talking about the companions. And so having them be fully like participating in the combat is great. Their thing is that they're fully customizable. Mm-hmm. That you get to do all of their gear, kit them out entirely in all their gear, and they look different as you put different armor and stuff on them.
It's impossible to understate or overstate how great that is and how much fun it is that you can just change their clothes. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it does lead to the point where sometimes I have people wearing armors that aesthetically I would rather they had them wear something else. But in this, it's so stat heavy that
it's just like real life would be. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I like that a little bit, being able to just like change the colors, the tints or whatever, or not have to have their face obscured by a big winged Viking helmet the entire time necessarily. But I need those +2 to stats. So it's whatever. I mean, that and it is in a weird way more realistic that we're using whatever is most effective. But we kind of talked about this. I think it was probably the Jade Empire episode where I kind of realized not being able to dress the characters, in addition to not really needing them in combat or using like being able to control them in combat or having them contribute, it made me so much less attached to those characters. Whereas I am so invested. This is, I think, probably Bioware's best cast of characters overall.
As a whole, I think the argument is pretty sound. Yeah,
I guess Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, that's a good
probably,
one.
Yeah, it's neck and neck.
Uh-huh. I mean, is there a? I guess Shale is sort of the clear standout. I guess I don't know.
I don't know.
They're all real good.
Any of them, I think you could make an argument for. I mean, well, not Win. Win sucks.
Win sucks. Yeah. There's some great ones though. Yeah, Morgan and Alistair are just all-timer BioWare characters. Alistair being the best version of the boring BioWare man that you start with. This is by far the best one.
But I also think I love Sten.
Sten's funny. Yeah,
maybe we'll get to these guys as we get to them.
Right.
Because as we go through the party, we can or do the plot. We'll encounter them one by one and sort of dig into them. But yes, overall, the party is a huge part of the success of this game.
Yeah. Another huge part about the success of this game is the origins conceit.
Yeah. Well, okay, that leads us into the story. One other thing to mention before we start the story, the thing that I'm finding I love here, it has to do with that customizable aspect, is this game has a really functional game economy. And that is something I found I was missing after Mass Effect and Jade Empire did not have that, really. And it is something you can get too deep into the weeds here, but I love looting things here. Even if I'm going to sell them off, trying different things, because I need to keep this balanced party. It's not like there's whole classes of loot. Like, I just don't need shotguns with this Mass Effect character I built. So they all go in the trash or whatever. Like, everything here I need to like look at and consider if I want somebody to use it. There's a million different varieties of them. There's a lot of different shops, and there's some really high-powered, cool stuff there. There's a lot to buy. I find myself really coveting gold. I'm tempted to take the less good quest outcomes that I know will pay more in a way that I just never, definitely not in Jade Empire, never really was in Mass Effect, probably wasn't in KOTOR either. But now, like, maybe it sounds like a strange compliment, but the way that this game makes me money grubbing is, I think, a sign of its success in its design.
It's very hard to do that in a game, is to get an economy that works that way, where you actually have to consider it and it's not irritating, where you can make money, but you can't make all the money. You can't just make the economy an irrelevance, because there's always a source for more. Mass Effect's kind of like that. I mean,
the first Mass Effect, the inventory is entirely a burden. Yeah,
right. A big part of it, though, is they just sort of streamline that entirely. And you don't really, you can buy like a couple things easily, and anything else you just don't have to bother with. In this, like you said, everything kind of has a place. And there is an old school charm to just like, well, I've got these items, I'm going to sell them for money. I'm over my limit. Got to go back to the town, and, all that stuff, classic video game stuff. And it's done pretty well here in a way that's not irritating. And that's nice.
Yeah. The only slightly irritating part about it is how expensive additional backpacks are.
Well, you got to buy additional backpacks.
Yeah, that's like number one priority. Whenever I see it, it goes additional backpack if they have it. And then if they've got one of like the usable books that basically gives you a level on one character.
Right.
Like that's number two thing to buy. Because experience is, of course, in the economy of an RPG, is the most valuable currency.
Right.
Ultimately.
And that's the one you can grind out in this ultimately, but still.
Yeah. Well, it's one, I don't think so, because this isn't one that does random encounters, really. Like, there are some randomization to it, but you will run out of enemies in this game to kill. You can't just like walk around the overmap like in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, right.
Fighting randomly generated monsters forever.
That's true. Yeah.
You also can't make enough gold to buy every single thing from every single merchant, or even like the high end stuff. But you'll see stuff that costs 100 gold when you're 10 hours into the game and like I've only put together 8 or 9 gold and be like, oh, there's my target. Get that grind mindset going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's a good one. I don't know, all-time great? Probably not. It's a little too beholden to, economies in other video games, probably, but it learned how to make it work. And that's key and good. And it's not irritating in the way, and in its expansiveness in the way something like Skyrim, where you just, remember I would have spend hours in that game just managing my personal economy and being mad at the end of it. It's regular stuff, I guess, perfected, which is kind of
there is. Yeah. I think they manage it too pretty well. One, I think that their system for like being able to press one button to move something to your junk pile, and then go to a merchant and hit one button to sell all your junk. That, I mean, it's such a blessing for coming right out of Mass Effect 1, which in 2009 you probably were. Mm-hmm. It seems very simple, but that's helpful. And they give you plenty of loot. Like most monsters will drop something, and not all of it's stuff you're going to use, but it is sort of leveled with you, and it doesn't totally bog you down with, I'm now level 19 and I'm picking up all these level 2 pairs of leather shoes and chainmail armor that I haven't had any use for 20 hours now.
You can still sell it when it does pop up too. With that,
it's easier to manage. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it ties back to how successful the companions are and how customizable they are, and the fact that I want to get them all. That there's also, each of them has 15 slots to put different things on. And it's fairly intuitive, you got your head, you got your necklace, you can put a ring on each finger, you put your boots and your helmet on, whatever. But I don't mind doing that stuff in this game, which is a high compliment, even though it sounds very basic.
Yeah, I mean, especially just with the amount of times we've done this in random video games. It's familiar stuff. So if it's not good, it really sticks out. And it's good here. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, we talked about, I understand how detailed all these environments are. That's really nice. Mm-hmm. As we get into the origins, that there's a bunch of different ones. And I love the art design of this game.
Yeah.
That is something that is going to be a bummer going on. And I watched the trailer for Dragon Age, the Veilguard, the new one's coming out soon. Mm-hmm. And I really hate how it's trending more and more into anime looks as the series goes on. I love the look of this.
Mm. It's very brown.
It's got lots of accent colors. Different.
It is. It's a product of its time in a very good way, I guess. This is a classic old school looking game. It does not have the sort of the Tony Scott polish of Mass Effect. This is fully just like we're in the weeds of D&D source book kind of design elements, and it does feel inspired, I guess you could say, inspired by medieval pre-perspective art, if you're going to be generous, but to great effect, I would say. The design of these characters is very good. It's very strong. The world itself, plenty of memorable locations pop up here. I think the writing is kind of what gives it its power. That all these places seem to be very well realized extrapolations of the world as described. I'm thinking like Orzammar, the dwarven city. That is so perfectly designed to look the way that it is required to be narratively. Is this this underground dwarven caste system? It's kind of fantastic. It's that stuff is wonderful. There's less good versions of it. The Dalish elf stuff isn't too impressive per se, but when it's cooking, it's really cooking design wise.
Yeah, we'll get to the Dales when we get there too.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right that a lot of the environments are fairly brown, but the characters are quite colorful within those environments, and they always pop out as the most interesting thing. And the armors that you're putting on them are pretty lovingly crafted, especially the big heavy ones. So your guys tend to be the coolest thing in the environment, even as some of the environments are pretty cool, which is nice. And I don't like, yes, there's design stuff here that's just straight out of Dungeons and Dragons source books. That's true. That's not exactly what I meant. I meant the animation style, I guess, just the way, because you could take that source book stuff and do it in an anime style, as they're starting to do in later games. And I don't like that as much. This feels warmer. It feels chunkier to me. I love the way my heavy armor crunches around every step I take in this game. And even as these graphics were not state of the art at the time, this was not impressive looking from a mechanical standpoint. I just like the way it looks.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost one of the thing where it's a little hard to remove myself from my relationship to these things. You know, like I've played this game many times, and I'm very, very familiar with the locations in it and the look of it. And I'm just like, well, of course. Yeah. That's what it looks like. You know, that's the, that's what Denerim is supposed to look like. You know, look at the vibes of Denerim, or Lothering, or, you know, any of these places. I'm just like, I don't know, old hand at this point in my head, in the way the Citadel is, or, you know, a number of Mass Effect locations like that. So hard to judge maybe for me, but yeah, I mean, it looks great. Looks great.
And the last mechanical bit to mention, in contrast to Mass Effect 3, perhaps, tremendous enemy variety in this game.
Yeah, that's nice. Mm-hmm.
You're going to fight a lot of Darkspawn eventually, but that's okay. They are the main bag. They're the orcs. You know, you should fight a lot of orcs in a Lord of the Rings game. But there's plenty of humans and dragons and wolves and bears and ogres and demons and giant spiders, of course. And they're mixed up quite a bit in different areas. You know, there's zombies. It's more of a full D&D monster manual book. That was a great thing about the Baldur's Gate series, that they did that, and what was lacking in Jade Empire and Mass Effect to different degrees.
That's true. I mean, you know, that's one of the promises of high fantasy is you got a lot of things to kill in it. You know, it's always something that, you know, you're going to have on the table there. I don't know. They're stopping short, I guess, of just doing straight up D&D monsters. No owl bears, but you know, I don't know. Do they have an answer kind of for that sort of thing? Like, I guess there's definitely stuff as you go through the game that is unique.
I think you fight
brood mothers and such.
Yes, there is definitely that. And I think you probably fight something that they label a corrupted bear or something like that.
Yeah, things like that. Sure.
But there's no displacer beast. You're right. So anyway, that's all mechanical stuff. Maybe we'll touch on more of it as we go, but now we should probably get into the origins. Which is the conceit of this game. There are 6 distinct origins that give you your own like starting act of the game. About 2 hours probably.
Yeah, 90 minutes, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you can choose to be a dwarf, an elf, or a human, and there are 2 different origins for each race.
Yeah. And mage is kind of it's sort of a catch-all, which is you can do it with dwarf or human, or not dwarf. You can do it with elf or human, but not dwarf. And this is great because this is like...
that's right. There's 3 possible origins for the elf.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of world building before you even realize it, just by what you're able to pick as your origin. You're just like, oh, dwarf can't be magic user. Interesting. You know, like stuff like that. Kind of, it's sort of emergent as you go through your character creation screen. It's already drawing you into the mythology of Ferelden. So,
and this is a great, I think, resolving of the tension between the 2 different options of Mass Effect, where you can pick a class, but you're going to play an authored character. That Shepard's role is going to be the same, kind of no matter what, and their personality even is going to be about the same. And then Baldur's Gate, where you can pick any variety of 25 classes and spread across 7 races and either gender, and you can kind of make that character into anything, but because of that, they're a total blank slate. And this allows you a range of choices, but it makes your character immediately not a blank slate because it gives them an individualized backstory.
Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. One I'm surprised did not become
I mean, I've never seen anyone else do this. I'm sure it's been done, but not that I could tell you. I couldn't name another game that uses this choose your origin and play it out. I guess Cyberpunk does a version of this, a less developed one, and that's 20 years later.
I don't know. I hit a point shortly after this game where I basically only played Bioware and Rockstar games as far as new releases go. So
right.
I couldn't tell you exactly, but I think probably the main reason why it isn't copied endlessly is that it's a ton of work.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Where like 5/6 of this work a player is not going to experience in any given playthrough. So they probably don't love that from a design and like financial perspective.
I mean, it's a narrative hook or a marketing hook for this game.
Yes.
This is like Dragon Age Origins is the name of it. And it's like, where did you come from? Play it out. You'll have your own individualized story. Everyone will. And it's awesome. Honestly, it makes it very exciting to start up a second playthrough. There are 6 origins in this game. I am currently on my 6th playthrough of Dragon Age Origins. That's where I landed. I'm doing the Dalish Elf story now, and it's been fun every time because it is such a different starting place, and you can kind of see the stories that you're missing in the other parts of the game that you're doing. And it's what a conceit. It's really cool, and it does give this game an enormous amount of its own identity and personality.
Yeah. Do you have one? I'm trying to think of how many times I've actually played this. I think I played it all the way through 3 times, and now I'm on my 4th. But I definitely tried out all the different origins 10, 12 years ago just to see. I remember the Dalish Elf being my least favorite by far. And the mage one was the very first one I did. And I don't remember it that well. I don't remember it being bad, but I've sort of decided from a narrative perspective that the mage tower is the wrong place to start.
Right.
And so I've never done it again.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's 6 to try. No reason to. But I appreciate the mage tower though in the context of there's 5 other versions. Like I want one that starts there and sees the mage story. The mages are pretty damn interesting in this world. The way all their story works is great, and you want to be part of that in a direct way. And it's obvious that you got to have at least one mage opening.
Yeah,
it's cool that you can share that between human and elf. It's the only kind of racial opening that is the same either way.
Yeah, the human one's more limited, I guess. Okay, so the Dalish Elf one, I don't even remember the details of that very much, but
there aren't many.
All of them, in all of these origins, you go through a little adventure that leads to you being banished from your home area, and taken in by the Grey Wardens. There's a guy, Duncan, who's sort of your Obi-Wan Kenobi guy.
I very explicitly a Qui-Gon Jinn guy, I thought.
Okay, sure. But Qui-Gon Jinn is your Obi-Wan Kenobi guy for the prequels. So
yes, he is.
Yeah. So,
but the vibes are very Qui-Gon. This is
okay, sure. And he's going to take you away from there. I don't remember why you leave the Dalish Elf tribe at this point.
It's not a great reason. It's just sort of, would you like to try being a Grey Warden? Essentially. Yeah. It's not very...
Well, the reason is being a Dalish Elf sucks.
Kind of, yeah. Well, I mean...
Not as bad as being a city elf, but we'll get to that.
I'm being evil, so the inherent promise of this opening for me, for my Dalish Elf playthrough that is currently happening, is that I'm going to horribly betray all the people that I grew up with. to raise an army of werewolves later in the game. So there's a little tension just in that. But yeah, a good guy version of this playthrough, pretty boring.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's what I thought. Or at least compared to the other ones, which are quite good. And we'll talk about the mage one. I mean, the mage one involves helping one of your fellow apprentices escape.
We'll
get into
list these, I guess, just for
the
context,
politics.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying. We'll get into the politics of the mage tower and how that you're sort of prisoners there when we get to that in the main game. If you do one of the dwarf ones, you can be a dwarf commoner, where you are the dwarf city is run on a strict caste system. And so you are the lowest of the low, the casteless caste, which basically means you're an indentured servant to a local mafia boss. And you got to kind of break free from the clutches of the mafia boss and escape with the Grey Wardens there.
It's kind of it's kind of Han Solo's backstory, actually.
It's been a while since I've seen Solo now too.
Yeah,
pretty much. It is. Yeah. Or you can be the son of the Dwarf King, in which case you have a much more elaborate sort of Game of Thrones power struggle where one of your brothers betrays you and you are accused of murder and cast out and have to be taken in by the Grey Wardens that way. That seems to allow for some fun role playing of being like not just like good or evil, but like a elitist prick. Of, how dare you peasants touch me? But he's also now like being forced to live on the surface, which is like the worst place for the dwarves to be prestige wise. And there's some trading places stuff to it, I guess. I don't want to oversell it, but you can sort of throw that on to it yourself.
Yeah, Prince and the Pauper kind of, it's there for sure. Classic tropes of the genre. I mean, all these are kind of like based in sort of the history of fantasy storytelling. Here's some basic places to start with that you might be familiar with. The Mage Tower is a version of that. The Human Noble is another one. Which is your family's been displaced by a different great house, Paul Atreides stuff. So that's right there as well. Yeah, that's I think the two best, dramatically speaking, are the Human Noble or the City Elf. The City Elf, interesting. I mean, I get it. Yeah, it's good.
So the City Elf, it's one of the cool things about this. We talked about how, there's dwarves, there's elves, blah, blah, blah. The dwarves are not that far removed from Tolkien. Mm-hmm. Dwarves. They're isolationists. They live underground. They're
short, squat, bearded fellas who like gold. Yeah.
Yes, and they've got the caste system, which is a nice thing on there, but that's not a big spin on Tolkien. It's sort of an extrapolation of the noble hierarchies that he dealt with anyway.
Kings and such.
Yes. But the elves are totally different from Tolkien elves. They are an oppressed minority that live in like an apartheid state in a city, except for the Dalish, which live. It's not quite a reservation, but they are sort of confined to the wilderness where they get kind of the crappy part of the country that nobody else has settled yet.
Yeah, they're nomadic. Yeah.
Yes. And maybe there's more of a Romani aspect to them.
Right. Yeah, an underclass for sure.
Yeah. But in the cities, they live in what they call the alienage, which is the ghetto. And what happens there is that basically a human noble comes in to crash your friend's wedding and steal away the women to take to their estate for their party and rape. And you go on a rescue/revenge mission.
Braveheart shit. Yeah.
It's Braveheart. Which works,
Yeah.
Say what you will about Braveheart. That's an exciting sequence. And so you kill a noble there and have to flee with the Grey Wardens. And then there's the Human Noble, which, as you say, is a full-blown, House Stark, House Atreides being overthrown by a rival, and you are basically driven off into exile.
A rival randomly played by Tim Curry, by the way.
Weirdly, disappointingly played by Tim Curry.
Oh, yeah, he's checking the clock, man. He's just like, what? It's a video game? Sure, I'll be there from 3 to 6. That's what you get.
Which is a shame because he was more engaged in Command and Conquer.
Oh, totally. Yeah, famously.
Famously, yes. So yeah, it's weird. I've never seen a replacement level Tim Curry performance before. This is the one strike against this game I have found so far.
Mm-hmm. There's some wonderful voice work in this game. Not really from Tim Curry, though.
Yeah. So do you have a preferred one? I think I go City Elf as my number one. I think maybe because that was one that I played actually all the way through to completion. The dwarf ones, I think I did that early on. I think it was the very first one I ever tried was the Dwarf Noble. But this is also one of those games where you put it in the first time, you play it for a few hours, and then go, okay, now that I understand the mechanics, I need to start a new character that I can build from the ground up.
I have a fondness for Dwarven Commoner because it was my first one. It felt like a neat random choice to be as a first playthrough. And that one was my introduction to all the game's story and mechanics and stuff. And I saw a fondness for that one. I do think Human Noble is probably the most complete and satisfying run I've had of this game. I really liked that one. The options it gives you, narratively, choices you can make, things you can do. I ended up the queen when I did that one, and that was really fun. Stuff like that can be done with Human Noble. I think it's kind of the broadest in its storytelling potential.
That's what I'm playing through right now. Mm-hmm. As you had mentioned to me offhandedly that you thought that the Human Noble female version is sort of the canon.
I think so. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I thought that's what I've never done.
Yeah.
So I may as well try that out.
I am doing the Dalish one this time, as I said. An evil
That's not
character.
The canon one.
Nope. No. It's definitely feels like a second fiddle kind of opening. And my guy though, my character is Unum. He is a disgusting. I made it one of the grossest looking characters I've ever made for one of these games. She's just this terrifying, thin, gaunt, very angular, pointy elf. Looks kind of like a melting wax candle. He's horrible to behold. I'm really paying for this as I play this game.
But everybody still wants to fuck him, of course.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I think he's going to be very committed to his Morgan romance because I need her healing powers. We'll find out. I haven't actually done that before either.
Yeah. Well, okay. Romances are probably for a different time.
Probably, yeah. They're complicated in this game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the cool thing about these origins, besides what we said, is that for all of them, at some point during the main game, you're going to circle back to the location you started from, and you'll get some unique content based on which origin you did.
Yeah.
And the even cooler note that I like that they included is that you will also, as you go to the other ones, if you play the other origins, get sort of like Easter eggy type things to indicate that those storylines still happened if you did not pick that origin.
Yeah.
And they just ended very badly for like the player character was killed.
It's fun. Very good.
Yeah. We're at Ostagar, which is a sort of an old ruined city where the Grey Warden guy has taken us to officially join the group, and where the King of Ferelden, which is our country here in the land of Thedas, roughly the country of Ferelden is England culturally.
Yeah.
And next to it is the country of Orlais, which is culturally coded as France, and which ruled Ferelden until very recently and was overthrown and kicked out. And then there's other countries around. You've got Antiva across the sea, which is culturally Spain.
Yep.
And
Tevinter, of course.
The Tevinter Imperium is sort of the old Holy Roman Empire at this point in the High Middle Ages. It used to be a big, like, spanning the whole continent empire, but it's now shrunken its territory down, although it still exists technically.
And they're sort of debased magic users. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
There's others, references. I don't know exactly. I think they call the Anderfels what would probably be Scotland.
Sure.
Term. I don't know exactly what to track Navarre or Ravane onto. We haven't gotten good looks at them, but there are lots of things going on outside the borders of where this game will take us, which is cool. That the world map is much bigger than the game map in this case.
This is just Ferelden in this game, right? Maybe a jump somewhere else once or twice, but Ferelden. Yeah, I
think it's all within official Ferelden borders. I'm not sure. You're on the borders of the Kokori Wilds here, they say.
Of course.
I'm not sure if that is officially inside or outside the line on the map. But we're in an old ruin here. There's an army of darkspawn that has come up out of the ground. So the orcs are back, and this is what the Grey Wardens are for. Periodically, from time to time, something called a blight will happen, which is where the darkspawn come up out of the ground and try and destroy the world, because they have found a sleeping dragon underneath the ground where they normally live, and sort of tainted the dragon into a darkspawn version of a dragon called an archdemon.
A long winter, if you will, with a night king figure. Yeah.
Yes, they call the dragons the old gods. But now there's an archdemon which will lead them to attack the surface. And when this happens, this is the main thing the Grey Wardens are for, to lead the defense of the world of men against this. And the current king of Ferelden is sort of naive.
It's a callow youth.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Who's very enthusiastic about this prospect. He likes the idea of fighting with the Grey Wardens and achieving a glorious victory. And his sort of hand to the king is Tairn Loghain, the Tywin Lannister of this game.
Mm-hmm.
And his father's best friend, who helped his father overthrow the Orlesians when they were occupying Ferelden. And he's still sort of fighting the last war from that. He's not taking the Darkspawn that seriously because he's more worried about Orlais using this as an opportunity to reestablish their conquest of Ferelden.
Right away, you're sort of inundated with a lot of exposition here in this game, a lot of world building, and
a lot of politics.
And it all lands, right? Like all of this, you understand and you grasp right away. It does a very good job of that. At least I think this is one of those things where it's very hard for me to tell anymore because I'm so familiar with it. But my memory is that like the first time you hear all this, you're just like, yes, of course. Yes, a blight is coming. Okay. There hasn't been one in a while. I think, no one really respects the blight anymore. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Like that sort of thing. It all works narratively. And this is why I say this reminds me so much of reading a fantasy novel, the exposition, is copious, but it's why you're there. Like that's the juice in a sense. That's what makes it fun, is if you can really engage with this story. That's how the thing works. It's necessary that you do for it to work.
Settling into the world. That is a thing that especially geeks like to do. Maybe that's part of the appeal of fantasy stuff. Maybe not everybody loves that to the same degree.
Right. The Silmarillion's not for everyone, but it's awesome that it's there.
Yeah, the Silmarillion is, one, difficult to say, and two, just nothing but that.
Right.
This
is not on that.
That without a story. This has a story. Yeah. Yes, it's easy to understand. The blight is not complicated to understand. Maybe if you don't do a lot of optional dialogue, like probing, you won't get Loghain's motivations and backstory coming through very clear. But you'll get that he's a grumpy prick.
Yeah,
that doesn't think much of his quote unquote nephew, the king.
Mm-hmm.
The king's also married to his daughter. There's that too.
Right. Yeah, the web of relationships and who holds power in this is actually quite well drawn and complicated in the way you expect from this sort of story. It's what you want. And let's see what else is going on here. We're hanging out with Duncan, our Qui-Gon, and he introduces us to Alistair.
Yes,
who ends up
who is our first full-blown party companion. Like you said, he's the Bioware sort of vanilla guy. Mm-hmm. They sat you with it first to get your bearings in this world. Except we're already a couple hours into this world. Maybe that contributes to why he doesn't have to be so personalityless.
Yeah, he's got a lot of personality. Do you think Raphael Sbarge is irritated that he didn't get to play Alistair?
Probably, but they made the right choice, clearly.
Yeah. That's a joke for people who know, I guess. Okay.
Of course.
Yeah. But this is I guess the layers of who he is kind of get exposed the more the story goes on. As he initially presents, he's just sort of a smart ass human guy,
He's a sassy boy.
Yeah. Very. I always think of him as Lone Star from Spaceballs.
A little bit.
The same mark. Yeah.
But Lone Star is cockier because he's
Alistair's
got more Han
cocky.
Solo in him.
Alistair's pretty cocky.
Well, Alistair has a lot of beta to him. He is very willing to follow and uninterested in leading, which I say will come into play in the latter half of this game. But that is a trait of the Bioware, the first piece of graham cracker that they hand you is usually it's somebody that's not going to push your character very hard on the good or evil spectrum or object too much to what you're doing. And sometimes that makes them very bland and interesting. With Alistair, you sort of get better context for why he's not eager to take the reins of much of anything later on.
Mm-hmm. This is a great character. This is like full stop. I think this
character works so well. And the fact that you can do so many different things with him narratively is remarkable. Like, he has a complete arc however you decide to play this. And it can be incredibly satisfying in either way. I mean, and when I say
it can be real bleak,
it can be very bad for him, or he can end up being the most important character in the world based on how you play the game. This is not only is this really good as a character for Alistair, it's also like one of the places that your player choice really matters and really defines the story that you tell is in how you handle this guy, and you can kind of have any sort of relationship with him you want. Human noble, you can have a full romance with him, and a few other races too, I believe. But you can also have this like best buds kind of Garrus relationship with him. You can have this prickly adversarial relationship with him, where you can essentially be Scar to his Mufasa. Is essentially how I'm looking forward to playing this, I guess, in my current evil playthrough. There's so much you can do with Alistair, and it kind of works no matter what. And that's really impressive.
Yeah, he's a great character, like you said. And well, I'm trying to do the romance with him, with my human noble lady, because I've never done that before. My eye is wandering to Leliana, as it will.
He's a nice soft boy. He's a good guy who won't be mean to you, and that sometimes isn't the most interesting thing to play with in RPG.
Well, you tease out that he's a virgin, explicitly. That's in there.
yeah.
But it's played with nuance and with actual personality, and it is one of the things we talked about here is that when the writing of these games is at its weaker points, is that what they struggle with is having the quest lines having to culminate with some decision that is placed entirely in the lap of your player character, regardless of how tangential you are to the actual conflict of this story. And the design of Alistair and his personality makes it so your relationship with him dictating how his story plays out, and in a way like the fate of the nation, feels like it makes sense given this characterization. More sense than it probably should.
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is your role as a mover and shaker. This is what's fun about RPGs in a sense, is that you get to determine the fate of nations and the individual fates of the people that are the characters that are directly related to. This is all the best things an RPG can do, kind of with a character, and that he's not the only one that applies to in this game. There's others, Morgan, that'll come up and have similarly impactful storylines and performances. Yeah.
Right. So we're at this camp while they're preparing to fight the Darkspawn again, and Duncan sends you out on a mission into the wilds to collect some Darkspawn blood to help with your ritualistic joining to the Grey Wardens, and also try and find a chest with some Grey Warden papers in it. And so he sends you out with a couple of red shirts to round out your party.
The reddest of shirts, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
Davoth and Jory, I believe, right? Is that the names?
Yeah. It's definitely Jory and Dava something. I want to say Davos, but that's the Game of Thrones guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jory is actually the name of a Game of Thrones guy who's kind of a red shirt in the first book of that.
Yeah.
So this. Yeah, they read the books. They read those books for sure. So you go out there, you do, this is kind of your first full party dungeon crawl. I guess it depends on which origin you did. You might have been able to do a little bit of that.
This is this is like, here's what the game is, kind of. The Korkari Wilds is your first big board. Yeah.
Yeah. You get to fight some Darkspawn, and then you meet up with Morrigan, who is a Witch of the Wilds, and another just S-tier Bioware character.
Yeah.
I think she is so wonderfully voiced by Claudia Black, who I gather has been on some TV stuff that I've never seen. I don't know. I know her as nothing but this.
Well, this is a role that could define an actor for you, because it's a wonderful, wonderful character and a sort of an epic all-timer voiceover performance, in my opinion. One of the greats from a Bioware game.
Yeah. So she is raised by Flemeth, an old crone of a witch of the wilds, who is like sort of maybe this mythological figure, possibly 1,000 years old.
Love all this.
Unclear.
Yeah.
But they're both witches. Magic exists in this world. So they're kind of figures of legend, but also can really do magic. But they also, like, when you talk to Morgan, she'll talk about how, like, they say a lot of stuff. A lot of us is just us fucking with people to get like the local tribespeople to leave us alone. Like, but she's also an incredibly powerful magic user in your party. So she's very useful to have around. Like you said, you need magic in your party just as part of the game mechanics here. You're fighting with one hand tied behind your back if you don't get to use the crowd control stuff that the magic brings. And you don't have another option for a mage if you weren't one yourself for quite a while. And even when you do, we're not gonna spend a lot of time talking about Wynn when we get to her.
No. But
she's actually in the camp at Ostagar to talk to if you want to.
She certainly is.
I don't think I even bothered.
Yeah, Wynn is a nice old woman. She's probably one of the least interesting characters in your team, but also very important for most playthroughs because she is the committed healer, and that is a very useful role in this game. So you end up with a lot more Wynn than you want sometimes.
Yeah. So once you talk to them a little bit, and they give you these treaties, these ancient treaties that the Grey Wardens had with different groups. They're supposed to allow them to commit. That says the elves and the dwarves and the humans will commit troops to the Grey Wardens in the event of a blight. Mm-hmm. Hooray. Now, the main thing is we go back now to do our joining ritual where we become a Grey Warden, and that involves drinking darkspawn blood out of a chalice. And it doesn't go great for everybody.
It can kill you, turns out. Yeah.
The one, kills one of the red shirt guys outright, just like poisons him. And then the other guy gets cold feet saying, I don't want that to happen to me. And Duncan, our Qui-Gon Jinn buddy, stabs him to death.
It's really hard, too. It's a good stab. It looks like.
Yes, it is. They're really into blood spray here, even just like the graphics don't
so much blood in this game.
Can't live up to the ulterior spray that well, but they still use it a lot.
It's very funny how you'll often see dramatic scenes played out just drenched in blood in this game.
Yes.
It's very frequent.
Yeah. And so you drink it and survive, obviously.
Yeah.
Because you're special.
No big deal. Yeah, for sure.
And now we get to the big set piece here of it's time to fight the Darkspawn. You and Alistair are given the task of staying behind in this like crumbling tower to light the beacon signal to tell Logain when to charge in with the reserves.
Very Lord of the Rings, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, drop the hammer blow.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's complications, obviously. They find that Darkspawn have snuck into the tower before the battle, or as the battle starts, so you have to fight your way up it. And there's a bunch more there. You get a couple more red shirt characters that will not last much longer, but so you have a full party here. And when you get up there, you light the beacon, and dun dun dun, Taron Logain turns his back and doesn't charge, and takes his army off the field and leaves the king and your buddy Duncan to be slaughtered by the Darkspawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know, is this shocking when it happens? I don't know if that's the right word. I mean, you definitely get the sense that this initial scrimmage with the Darkspawn is not going to go as well as everyone seems to think. You know, that's not the shock, I guess. I guess that it's the presentation of Taron Logain is the bad guy is, I guess, the big reveal here. And it's not shocking exactly, but it is kind of, it happens early enough that it's not supposed to be. They're just straight up just like, yep, he's the guy. Go get this guy.
Yeah. Well, it's first act stuff. It's like, now we have a game.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Because you are, after you're like knocked out at the top of the tower and wake up back at Flemeth and Morgan's hut, they reveal that Flemeth somehow saved you from there. And it's just you and Alistair are the two remaining Grey Wardens in the whole country. And all you've got are these old pieces of paper to take around to different places and try and raise armies to defeat the blight, which is only going to get worse. And Taron Logain now, too, who's sort of, taking over the country. and Flemeth sends Morgan to go with you for kind of her own reasons. But take her because, again, we need a mage in our party, and also she's animated to be a pretty hot lady with side boob hanging out and whatnot.
Very much so, yes. Yeah, she is a classic goth kind of Tim Burton Winona Ryder type. I guess it's very okay. So this opening here, this is the opening of Dragon Age, the sort of the first act. If you want to break this into acts, that I don't know if that quite works. I don't know that I could tell you a better opening for a game than this one. It is about as good as it gets within the BioWare field. Without outside of that, I think this is kind of all-timer stuff for me. I've never had a game draw me in quite as well. And games have learned from this. This is an influential opening, even if people aren't committing to the Origins stuff necessarily. But you play like The Witcher 3, the big Witcher game. It's doing some of this stuff too. A lot of games that are built like RPGs kind of feel like they're in the shadow of this opening a little bit. And it helps.
Yeah, I've seen lots of RPGs do versions. Mm-hmm. Lots of RPGs I know of have done versions of stuff like this. But you're right. This is probably the best expression of it that I can think of.
Yeah.
Especially if we're including all of this, the origins through all the Ostagar stuff.
For the purposes of this conversation, yes, absolutely.
It seems often the case with the BioWare stuff that the people you get saddled with first as your party companions are some of the least interesting characters. Not so here, because the first two you get here are two of the best.
Yeah.
Morgan is one of the best video game characters, I think, out there. And so she's very kind of antisocial. She grew up in the woods with just one old lady around. And she's also, part of her magic is she can turn into animals. So she's observed humans to a fair degree and interact with them a little bit, but just doesn't think very highly of them. But she's kind of sexually uninhibited too, is fun, but she's just very opinionated and funny. There's a playful edge to the performance. Just all around good stuff.
And the line drawn between what is myth and was real with her and Flemeth is really good too. It's kind of elastic. It can go, you get the sense that the stories are overblown and, and that they're not quite as powerful or unusual creatures as they present, but maybe that's bullshit. Maybe that's a smokescreen. And they are indeed.
Well, maybe, maybe with Flemeth, she's more powerful as time goes on. We'll find.
Oh yeah, exactly.
But we also find out that, she refers to Morgan as her daughter, but we realize fairly quickly from talking to Morgan that she's not a biological daughter of hers.
Yeah. Oh, the lore with these guys, it's so good. It's so interesting and cool and so good for the stakes of the game. Yeah, Morgan is. Look, she's in the trailer for Dragon Age: The Veilguard, the new one that's coming out. This is I think she's appeared in all of these games. Maybe not two.
Yeah. Flemeth did though.
Certainly. So yeah, this is one of the most important characters in the BioWare or in the franchise for the Dragon Age games. Yeah. And absolutely. always worked from the very first scene you see her in. So yeah.
She's got tons of personality. Mm-hmm. She and Alistair immediately dislike each other. It's
great.
Which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want that friction between the characters, and you can side with one over the other or try and play peacemaker. It's a little frustrating that the mechanics here where they track how much your party members like you, and by telling you after an interaction, Alistair approves +4.
Right.
Morgan disapproves -5. And Morgan will disapprove of you doing pretty innocuous, just courtesy, just being polite to people.
Mm-hmm.
Or just not. And that can be annoying. It's also pretty easy to build back up your meter with people because
you can buy it. Yeah.
You can buy it with gifts.
They
have diminishing returns, but
it's something in this game I think has aged a little. It's surprising how much of this game hasn't aged in that way. But yeah, the relationship system
has been improved and modified and tweaked in a positive way for this series.
Having there be gifts that you can give people to raise that meter helps. I think I see that the rationale. I think that you don't want people to feel like they're doing actual role playing in the quest lines has cut them off from content or doing role playing with the other characters that they're interacting with.
Being able to control the story is good. Yes, having having a way to go back and change things, not being completely absolutist is good. Especially considering most people are going to play this once, like us.
And then having some of them be like gifts that are tailored to like, they might give you a +2 with Morrigan, but if you paid attention to what Liliana likes and you give it to her, she'll give you a +10.
Right.
Like that's an okay mechanic. It gets weird when part of the mechanic is if they like you enough, it opens up sex options.
Sure.
Where you can like purely buy sex from your companions. That gets a little weird. But on the scale of how video game romances and video game sex happens, it's not the weirdest.
Right. Some of those early Witcher games, it's like, well, this is fucked up. Yeah, that's right. This is probably an influential system, though, as sort of aged as it is. I think a lot of games kind of build off this gifts and romance. I mean, it's an entire franchise now, or not franchise, a genre of game now is dating sims.
That's true.
I don't know how much credit I want to give Dragon Age for that, but it's definitely like in the early development phases of what those were.
Yeah. This must be pulling. Dragon Age must be pulling from that more than it's pulling from Dragon Age, but I don't know. I've never messed with those.
Probably. It's still early, though. It's still very early in the development phase.
Mm-hmm. What I like about it, getting away from the gifts, is just the idea that you're taking your party with you and you're not going to be able to keep everybody happy all the time. So there's going to be pluses and minuses from different choices. And that, arguably putting a number value to it makes it less organic and more prone to the min-maxing gamer instinct than you want it to be. But I like how it works in this game overall, that I will get approvals and disapprovals at the same time from the same decision from different party members.
I like that it's a system you can somewhat game if you want, but don't have to. It's just something that it makes sense. Like what is being offered, you can figure out and maximize and do your best with. And it's something in your control. That's great. And I usually avail myself of that because kind of managing the story is sort of the juice when you're playing it for the third, fourth, or fifth time.
Exactly. And we're about to get into that now that we're getting to the end of the rails here and into the open world. And we'll touch on that next time and meet the rest of our party members.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for joining us for more Bioware Omnibus. I'm very excited to be jumping into Dragon Age. Much like Mass Effect, a foundational series for me, but in a very different way. So excited to revisit all my friends in Ferelden and Orlais.
And tell them to fuck themselves and kill them.